one.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and this is my colleague, Tracy Priest.
Hi, everybody.
And we're with The Road to Retail. On our podcast, Tracy and I hope to offer tips, insights, ideas, and examples for how small, emerging, challenger CPG brands can build their business. Everything from determining if you're ready to grow, where to start, how to prove it online, how to go about securing distribution with the national retailer, driving your business through to the consumer, or how to go about finding an investor. The bottom line is Tracy and I would love to help you grow your business and avoid some of the mistakes that we've made over the course of our careers. Tracy?
Absolutely. So Bruce and I, as he mentioned, have been in consumer packaged goods, commercial operations for 30 plus years. And what we mean by commercial operations is sales, marketing, trade marketing, acquisitions, divestitures, managing distributors, managing brokers, selecting agencies. So we've done a lot, seen a lot. And that's really the purpose of our podcast, is to share those experiences with our audience. And also from time to time, we interview on our show founders so that they can share their insights and key learnings with our audience as well. And I think you guys have been really enjoying those interviews that we've been having lately. So Bruce?
So, one of the other things we want to add right up front is we're now, Road to Retail is available out on Spotify and iTunes. So if you want to subscribe, that would be great. So today's topic is going to be about attending a trade show. It's an expensive, it's complicated, but if you think you're ready to cross that bridge, that's what we want to talk about today. Tracy, why don't you give a little bit of background about, what even trade shows are?
Yeah, absolutely. So we get this, Bruce and I get this question all the time from our clients and industry colleagues about what trade shows do I need to attend? And it's an expensive endeavor, so you want to be very strategic about the trade shows that you attend. Also, this was perfect timing because in a couple of weeks, one of the biggest trade shows in the industry is coming up, which is what they call Expo West, which is Natural Products Industry Expo. So we thought today would be a great time to share with our audience about trade shows, what to think about, how to pick which ones you want to go to, what kinds of trade shows there are, and the things that you need to do to prepare to get the most out of your trade show.
So Tracy, before we even roll into kind of the dialogue, what types of trade shows even are there? I mean, is it just retailer specific, industry? How about a few seconds on that?
So there's industry specific trade shows, which like I mentioned, there's Expo West, which is for natural products. There's one on the West Coast, which is the big one in Anaheim, California, every year in March. There's one in Philadelphia every year for the East Coast. And then you've got distributor shows. The big distributors, KeHE and Unifi, just came from the KeHE show this past week. And then there's also other industry shows, like for convenience show, which is called NACS for convenience stores. There's the Sweets and Snacks show. And then distributors, and then they have some regional shows, as well, like a California Grocers Association.
Excellent. So thanks for that background. So as you start to grow and you think, hey, maybe a way to accelerate my growth is to go to some of these trade shows, you really need to investigate what shows might be pertinent to you. As Tracy said, there's natural, there's a lot of health and beauty, there's distributor, then there's regional shows. So it can be a bit overwhelming. So how do you decide which you should attend? So first off, do some research, Google around, talk to your colleagues and suppliers. And sometimes in various industries, you have frenemies, some of the brands you compete with, you might hear shows they've gone to, or they might just flat out tell you, oh my God, that was the worst thing I ever did, or this one was really good. So it could be good to really do two things. Do some research and attend a couple of shows just as an attendee. Don't go through the drama and expense of trying to get a booth and staff it and send all that stuff out there. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But just get a badge and walk the show and say, this is an environment that would be helpful to me, or good grief, I'm glad I didn't spend the money to go there. But think about that, because the other things you have to think about as you decide to go is not only attending the show, traveling to it, opportunity cost of not being, in your office working. You need a couple of people beyond just yourself at a show, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Samples, etc. The other thing, as you start to hone in on this, is get out an old school calendar and map out the timing of the 1, 2, maximum probably 3 shows you might even think about attending, and just make sure they're not all on top of each other. Because if you ever decided to go to, say, one show 1 week, then you had a gap and then another show, preparing and doing those shows great, I mean, that'll take a toll. It'll take a toll on your body, because working the shows is hard, it's expensive, and then you're out of the field driving your business. Tracy?
Yeah, great point. As an example, last week, 2 of the big distributor shows were actually on the same exact dates. Last spring, one of the distributor shows was in May, and then you had a fancy food show in New York, and then another distributor show. So they can be stacked on top of each other, which can be very taxing on you physically, as well as also expensive. So I wanted to add one thing, Bruce, is in talking about the types of shows. So there are shows where you are going to build your brand and build a brand awareness, which Bruce will talk about in a minute. And then there's selling shows, which are mostly the distributor or regional shows. So make sure that when you're looking at your show strategy, you're not going to an Expo West or, another show, a Cosmoprof or a fancy food show. You're not taking orders there. You're introducing the attendees to your brand and making your brand visible, to those attendees. So make sure that you realize that you're on a lot of shows, you're not taking orders or selling anything.
Yep. Tracy, talk about some of the brass tacks of like committing to a show, etc.
Yeah. So the lead times are long. So for example, Expo West, you have to pick your booth. So the show is always the first week of March. So after the show or during the show, you actually go and pick your booth for next year. I have to put down a small deposit. Usually distributor shows, they start opening up enrollment about 6 months in advance. So just make sure that you understand what the timelines are for distributor shows. For example, your samples and sell sheets and things like that, you need to arrive at the show in a specific week window. Expo West, the same way. You've got a week before Expo, a couple weeks actually before Expo, for your booth to be shipped in. So just make sure that you understand that timing. Make sure you have lined up who you want to attend. Do you want your salesperson to attend? Do you want to attend? You want to have 2 or 3 people there, but again, you don't want too many as well, where there's all these people in your booth and buyers might be intimidated by all the people that are in your booth. So those are just some things to think about. Also, most of the shows have apps. So make sure you download the app so you can see who the attendees are, what the show times are. Most shows are 2 to 3 days. So make sure you plan for the people that are going to attend, how many people are going to be there, each day. They normally run from 10 to 6. So it is a long day for 2 or 3 days. Bruce, what did I miss?
Yeah, I don't think you missed much, but I'd like to add one thing. So in the shows that I've attended when we've had a booth, if we haven't been there before, you try to make kind of an educated guess of a location you'd like to be. And then at that show, as you walk around and see who's there, the next year, I would always kind of move my booth a little bit, right? Because if you just go for what's cheap, you're going to be at like the back of the convention hall, like right next to the bathroom and the dumpster, and you're going to get like no traffic. So yeah, you saved some money and you accomplished nothing. So we would constantly kind of move our booth into intersections of big of the big walkways. And the other thing you could do is over time, try to move a little bit closer to some of the bigger brands that are there, because they just get more volume. Either people are doing business with them, or they have a booth with a lot going on, whether it's, a celebrity spokesperson or samples. but you can pick up some overflow traffic just by being in a better location. So that's something that's always worked out well for me. And some of the brands that we've helped, we give them that piece of advice to stay open-minded about that.
Hey,
So let's
Bruce.
talk. Go
Hey,
ahead.
Bruce, one thing I wanted to add. So there are two types of shows, as I mentioned, shows where you build your brand awareness, and then shows that are selling shows. So those distributor shows and regional shows are what they call tabletops. So that's a small 10 by 10 booth. You get a table, so you'll want a table skirt and some kind of small backdrop. When you're going to an Expo West, a fancy food show, a Cosmoprof, which is a beauty show in Vegas, you're going to want to have, you know, a nicer booth with a backdrop, not just a pull-up backdrop, and make it really, you know, special and very pleasing to the eye. But the tabletop is really kind of what they call a basic show, and those are typically selling shows. So I wanted to make sure that people knew the difference.
No, that's important, because all the shows have their own little twist to them, both
Nuances.
real and what they try to tell you.
Yeah.
So what's the strategy for attending these trade shows? You know, what are your objectives? As Tracy said, some shows are there for orders, right? Others are there to meet people, to get your brand out there, and to kind of, frankly, give you a chance to do a little recon on the overall industry, see what your competitors are doing, see what retailers are sparking to. It's a great place to meet suppliers. You'll have lots of people wandering around talking to you about everything from ingredients to 3PL logistics to shippers to all kinds of things. So it can really build your book of contacts. So building brand awareness is one. Another type of show, you can sell stuff, meet suppliers. You can meet with retailers, and we're going to talk about the importance of follow-up. But you know, the retailers walk the show. If you're a rookie at these shows, sometimes the retailers turn their badge around so you don't know they're with a retailer. So as soon as you see a badge turned around, you know it is a retailer. I think it's kind of weird, but I've also seen retailers like literally get assaulted on their way to the men's or ladies' room. People are so like desperate to meet them. So I get it. But make sure you have objectives of what you really want to accomplish so that you can work through your list, because the show itself can be a whirlwind and you will get out of it what you put into it. In the rarest of occasion, you'll have a super hot product and people will beat a path to your door. That's the rare exception. Most of the time you need to work it hard. You have to have an interesting booth, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But Tracy, in terms of strategies for attending the shows, you've attended a lot more than I have. What do you see that works, or warnings for the folks?
Yeah, again, knowing what the strategy is really important. You'll be disappointed if you're going to an Expo West or a fancy food show and thinking you're going to take, you know, orders, or a buyer's going to come up and say, "Oh yeah, can you ship me, you know, 10 cases of each flavor?" It just doesn't, you know, work like that. So the strategy needs to be you're there at those shows, networking, meeting buyers, you know, really trying to get your brand out there. And so that's really making sure that you know what the strategy is really, you know, important. And then also, Bruce, talk about maybe some of the elements that you think people need to have, like samples and
We'll talk about that, because we've covered the types of shows already. Right. And again, the magic of Google, you can kind of figure out if you sell a lip gloss, you can Google around or think, and you'll find out where you should be. So how to attract people to your booth, right? So as Tracy was saying, the bigger you get, and as you hone in your kind of trade show skills, you're probably going to build a proprietary booth. When you do that, there are firms that specialize in it, and you probably want to overinvest a bit so that your booth can take a beating and getting shipped to and from, so it lasts a couple of years. If you cut corners too much, your booth will get the absolute stuffing beaten out of it, and within like 2 shows, it'll be kindling. But samples, information on your product, why are you different? We talk about that all the time. What's your meaningful point of difference versus the competitive set? how will you help retailers grow their categories? Why will consumers find your product interesting and give you their money? I've always found it's been helpful that as you get a little bigger and with the cost of everything coming down, kind of having some action in your booth draws people's attention. So what do I mean by that? Some people have like a mascot, and they'll have a mascot in a costume handing out samples. But what I'm talking about is have a couple of monitors. Even if you have a small booth, have one or two maybe behind you that are just running loops, whether it's testimonials you've shot on your iPhone, if you have any commercials, if you have a sales presentation, if you have any point of sale data showing your business growing, some sexy tabletop photography of what your brand looks like. But that motion and activity attracts people's eye and they'll come by. The other thing is, as Tracy was saying, you want to have enough people at your booth that you can handle everybody, but you don't want to have like 14 people in your booth. And then everyone's like, geez, if I go over there, I'm going to get attacked. So one of the things that I've always tried to encourage is you want to be disruptive and generate action at your booth, but you don't want to be rude, like, tackling people or forcing them to take your handout materials. You get a feel for it after a little while. And there's certain display people that are super aggressive, and sometimes it works. I think more often than not, it doesn't. And you also want to have sell sheets, because people are going to come by, they're interested, they may or may not want to talk to you, but on that sales sheet, have some info. I've seen pro and con about having like all your pricing down because, a competitor could maybe pick that up, but what your product is, how it ships, what's your inner pack, maybe a picture of it, etc. Tracy?
Yeah, so a couple things that I think about. So you do want to make sure that as you're manning the booth that you're engaging. So I like to use the rule of thumb as standing out front of the booth if you're in a 10 by 10 tabletop, or even at an Expo West where you have a booth where you can interact with people, talk to people. Hey, can I give you a sample? One of the things I would caution is, sampling can be expensive. Sell sheets can be expensive. So bring enough, but not too many, because buyers don't want to take a lot of stuff home. So a lot of buyers will say, hey, I'm interested. Can you follow up with me? Here's my card, send me samples and information via email, and send me samples after the show. So just keep in mind, you want to have enough, but not too much where it's costing you more money, to ship the samples back, to your firm more than it cost you to ship them to you. So that's one thing. And then, just be out, make sure your booth is open. So if you've got a couple people, that you're not huddled in your booth, just standing there talking, making sure then people are not going to come up to you. So I like to stand out in front of the booth, interacting with people. Hey, can I give you a sample? Hey, this is our sell sheet. I would not put pricing on there, as Bruce mentioned, because every retailer is different. Every distributor is different. If you are in a distributor, it wouldn't hurt on your sell sheet to put your code numbers. So if you're at KeHE or UNFI, put those on there so they know that, they can buy the product from one of their, distributors. Another idea is invest. Most big shows have lead retrieval machines, so you can just scan a badge, and at the end of the show, it'll print out all the people that you talk to on an Excel spreadsheet, and that'll lead into, your follow-ups, which we're going to get into, in a few minutes. Anything else that I left off, Bruce?
Yeah, just a couple of things. So as your show gets closer and closer, all the websites, generally, I would think everyone, I've never done one that didn't, has a list of who's attending. So keep reviewing that as the show gets closer. And if there's people that you want to meet, reach out to them. And, some will accept an appointment, some won't. A lot will say, I'll come by your booth, which is why you want to have more than, one or two people. You probably want to have, 2, 3, 4, depending how big you are. But reach out and work that list. If there's 2 or 3 suppliers you want to see, or 1 or 2 retailers, try to get them. Another thing is, at some point, make sure someone from your team walks the entire floor of the
Right.
show, or at
Good point.
least the part of the show that's pertinent to you. I always like to have someone walk the whole show because you never know where a good idea might come from. You might go see someone from a totally different industry, but they're displaying their product in a very unique way. Or you just start chatting somebody up and they've got a really good distributor in a place that you're looking for one. So you never know how that can work. And then the other thing I would say is you want to work the show, right? You've paid a lot of money. You've taken you and some of your team out of the field for a week. Get there early as soon as it opens and don't leave until it's done. The rubber shrimp and the warm O'Doul's non-alcohol beer will still be up at the bar. I always look around, and when I see all these people shutting their booth down a couple hours early, I'm like, what a bunch of losers. They've spent all this money and they're not working the show. I can't tell you how many times we've ended up having a really good meeting real early or real late, because sometimes that's when people, say a big retailer, will walk the show because they don't want to be assaulted at every booth they go by. But if there's only 5 or 6 booths in a row of 20 where there's still people there, your odds of engaging in a conversation are much higher. Tracy?
Yeah, you prompted one thing. So the website will definitely help you with the types of brands that are attending. And then usually the bigger shows like an Expo West will have an app, and it will also list out, who the attendees are. The other thing, Bruce, that I thought of that we didn't talk about, but I think is interesting, is to put your booth, to create a booth invite, especially for the bigger shows, and post that on LinkedIn, and then use that to attach to a buyer email that says, for example, I'm going to be at Expo West, I'm at booth blah, 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 and we'd love for you to, come by. So that's another great outreach tool. But post it on LinkedIn. I mean, I've already started to see brands putting Expo West, which is in early March, on their LinkedIn page that says, hey, we're going to be at Expo West. Here's our booth. We're going to have a happy hour, or we're going to be doing this. Come by and see us.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, because one of the other things that I've seen companies do, which I thought was clever, is about 4 to 6 weeks before a trade show, in their email signature, they'll say something like, we're attending the XYZ show in booth 214, come stop by. And then when the show's over, you just change that out of your email signature. So let's talk about follow-up. All right. So you've spent a lot of money, you've taken a lot of time, you've attended this show, you've worked your butt off for, 4 days of the show, and you've traveled and you're whipped. But now is where the rubber meets the road.
Absolutely.
You've got all these notes of follow-up. You got a bunch of cards. Follow up as soon as humanly possible. I don't care if you're tired. You shouldn't care either. You went there to get something accomplished, right? And no matter how tired you are, other people are tired too. And a big percentage of those people are going to put it off until they're not tired. You strike first, right?
Yes.
And every time you have that interaction, whether you're writing just on their card or in a notebook or in your tablet, when you follow up, try to be specific as possible. Hey, Tracy, thanks for coming by the booth. I enjoyed our discussion about X, and I would love to follow up. My availability is this, but follow up with detail and as soon as possible, because these people that have made a lot of contacts, at a certain point, they'll get bored of the follow-ups and they'll stop. So if you strike early, your odds of getting a response are better. Tracy?
Yeah, so I'm going to give an example of, so you want to be, as we always say, persistent, but not a pest. So last year I was at the Sweets and Snack Show at a retailer. They said, oh, I'm interested, send me samples. And it was literally not until, and this was a senior person that I met, and I would just follow up once a month. Hey, did you get the samples? What do you think? What else can I send you? And it wasn't until September or October, finally heard back from that person and said, I tried the samples. I loved them. Can you work with my buyer to have a meeting? And by December, we had a yes. So you never know when a buyer is actually going to respond. but just keep following up without being a pest. Don't email them every week. But, once a month, if you don't, follow up right after the show, like Bruce said, but if you don't get an immediate response, don't be discouraged. That's part of retail. But just continue from time to time. Hey, wanted to make sure you got everything you needed. What else information? Or give them an update. Hey, we just increased our marketing, or we just hit 5,000 followers on our Instagram, or we just got it. What they really love to hear is, we just got distribution at this and this retailer, wanted you to know. So don't just follow up to follow up, but provide an update and information that could then be the tipping point for them to give you a yes.
Yeah, exactly. So another quick example of where this has paid off is one time we were working the NACDS show, and we were working till the closing bell, and a person came by who had her badge turned over backwards. Turned out she was the DMM of a large OTC HBA buying group at one of the large food accounts in the country. She had come by because she heard we were giving out these like little Beanie Baby mascots for a new product launch, and she wanted one for her daughter. So we gave her one. She started asking about our product. She came into the booth, stayed for almost an hour. And that led to a meeting with her buyers, and we ended up getting 3 items into distribution. Would we have gotten them? Don't know. I'm competitive. I'd like to think we would have, but having the boss send a note to her team that these guys are going to be following up, it probably moved the needle forward for us. Tracy, what other points before we wrap this up here today?
I think the only other thing is like for training. So if you're at a distributor show, they use an iPad to take orders. So make sure that you get to the show a little early and get trained on that iPad so you know how to take orders. That's really important. So, and then if there's any other, training or small breakouts or whatever that you have time that you can attend, I would definitely encourage you to do that. Expo West has a ton of speakers, throughout the 4 or 5 days of the show. So if you have time and you can do that, it's a great way to also make connections. And then the other thing I would say is, as far as meeting buyers or setting up meetings with buyers, it's kind of difficult because the buyer is trying to get through the show. Expo West is a great example. It's so big now with 3,500 booths. Most buyers don't take meetings at those big shows because they just take so long to get through. But from time to time they do. So ask them, can I meet with you? Do you have 15 minutes at the show as a pre-show email? Or will you just at least stop by, the booth? And again, like I mentioned, here's our booth invite.
Yeah, a couple of other things just here as we wrap up. If you go to a show, and Tracy said this up front, and it's been a good experience, you'll have the chance to renew right away and save some money and possibly move your booth location. So keep on top of that. And then some shows offer some training or assign you a mentor if you're a first-time attendee. So if that's possible, take advantage of it. I've done that a couple of times. And at first I was like, this is kind of a waste. And boy, was I grateful I did, because the shows were bigger than I thought. And just the logistics of being in the right place at the right time, it was helpful to have someone kind of nudging me along. But, trade shows can be very helpful. They can accelerate your growth. They can expand your contact universe quickly. Tracy said that there's breakouts. So that's another reason, if you have a couple of people, work the show in advance in terms of what you're going to divide, because you don't want all 3 of you to go to the same breakout unless it's the only one of any interest. But try to push people into covering as much stuff as possible. It's the best way to get a return on your investment of this show. Tracy, anything else before the big finish?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot. I hope that our audience found this helpful, especially as we're getting into trade show season. So I wanted to mention a couple. Like I mentioned, Expo West is coming up in March. The Sweets and Snack Show is in May. The Fancy Food Show in New York is in June. So there's lots of opportunities. Cosmoprof, which is the beauty show in Vegas, is in July. So nothing sounds better than being in Las Vegas in July. but there's a lot of shows coming up here, in the coming months. So I encourage our audience to check them out and do your research and see if it's a good fit for your brand.
Big Finish.
The Big Finish. So thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope you found our content interesting and helpful. And please continue to follow us on our iTunes and Spotify, our YouTube channel, and also on LinkedIn, which is where we do post our podcasts during the month. So we appreciate you joining us, and you guys have a great day.
Good luck out there.
Yeah.